Welcome back to Creepy Kitty Creations for the most wonderful time of the year. I love Christmas. So today I'm actually going to be working on a doll that I started working on last year. I couldn't finish her, but I really wanted to make Sugarplum from the Nutcracker and the Four Realms. I love this Christmas movie, so I knew that I had to make a doll of Sugarplum after I saw her in the film, but this time I want to make a slight difference and make her a ballerina with pointe shoes and everything. I think that could just look so neat. I'm okay. Maybe I should leave the ballet dancing to the professionals, so here we go. So I already had this head prepped from quite a while ago, so I didn't include that in the video because it was already all just a clean slate. And I have this perfect hair that I got from AliExpress that actually looks like cotton candy, which is just perfect for Sugarplum because in this version her hair is cotton candy. And it's so cute, and I just thought this would be absolutely perfect, and I wouldn't even need to brush it out because it's got that lovely cotton candy texture. Now, Sugarplum's hair does have a slight purple tinge to it, so I'm going over the wefts with some purple pastel before I glue them. Now, I think when you see the dress for this doll, I think you will understand why I didn't get her finished on time last year. She was definitely one of the more hardcore ones, though now I can say that the Orchid Mantis was the most hardcore. So now I'm just gluing the wefts like I usually do with some fabric glue and waiting for them to dry. Okay, so now that those are dry, we need to get this sort of beehive bouffant of cotton candy. That is Sugarplum's hairstyle, so let's see what we can do. Now, I actually did all this last year, so this is all last year's filming, but it's all the same as my usual technique, just gluing on the wefts and just trying to sort out how this hair is going to go. I did pull out a little bit more to make her a sort of faux bun bouffant to go underneath and build the basis of the hairstyle, and that I can just fold these wefts over. So I'm doing all of the hairline first so that most of the hair is actually made up of the hairline and the rest is just that wee little puff of yarn. Saves on a lot of wefts, and I think it will get the desired result. Sorry if I sound a bit nasally, I haven't been too well, honestly. I got some quite bad news health-wise only a few days after finishing the Orchid Mantis video, so I'm not entirely in best form, so I'm sorry if I'm a bit quiet or a bit nasally. It's just because of that. So now I'm needle felting this puff of acrylic yarn so that it's sturdier and more in the shape that I want it to be. I thought this would just give me a bit more control over the style since I'm using this as a base. once I've kind of planned that out, I just take some tacky glue and stick the mountain of cotton fluff onto her head and start trying to shape the bun. Looking back, I think I could have done this better, but all in all, I'm quite happy with how it turns out. There wasn't quite enough weft to cover everything, so I just needed to glue a little bit of fluff on. And Sugarplum also has some sort of metallic mesh or ribbon in her hair. I think it's supposed to look kind of like a tiara. So I'm just trying to glue some of that in with the yarn where I can, so that I can get that same look that she's got in the movie. And I styled the rest off camera using a chopstick and a hair straightener to get her curls, and gluing some little diamantes along her hair to get that extra sparkle and shimmer. And I don't know about you guys, but I always remember when I went to fairs and we would get those little, they looked exactly like little silver beads, but they were like candy and they were crunchy. And this kind of reminded me of those, so I thought it fits with her. In the movie, she's the regent for the land of sweets. So I thought, how cute would it be if she had these little chewy candy crystal balls in her hair? One of the few times I've actually glued things directly onto the hair, but I'm happy with how it came out. It's not exactly like how it looks in the movie, but I'm okay with that. It's sort of, I mean, I'm already doing her kind of more in my style anyway, so I'm happy with how the wig came out, I think. So on to her dress. I'm going to do what I always do when making a new pattern, and I cover the doll in Glad wrap. And I didn't have any masking tape at the time, so I used duct tape, which is not ideal because I got pen all over my fingers because it kept wanting to brush off. But it served its purpose. So I'm just sketching on the shape of her corset. And just marking where each pattern piece starts and finishes, and the darts and whatnot. So now we can cut this off very carefully, although this is my mannequin doll, so I'm not too worried if I scratch it up a little bit. I use her for all of my clothes, doll clothes making. And now we just cut up all the pattern pieces into their individual components. There we go. And then I trace it onto just some normal paper because I know I'll lose these and they do look pretty crumply and wrinkly, and again the pen wants to keep coming off, so I thought this will make that easier because I don't want it transferring onto my fabric. So first I just trace every piece exactly and name it. And also I add little triangle notches, and they are typically used to show which pieces attach where. I find them really useful, especially because one piece always looks the same as the next, so if I have those I know that this is where, say, the back and the side get sewn together. So now I add on the seam allowance. If you would like a more in-detail video on pattern making and making patterns for dolls, let me know in the comments and I'll see if I can do something like that in the new year, because I enjoy making patterns. I sewed it off camera, just testing the fit. This sort of shows how I wing it a little bit, because I wasn't actually sure if this was going to fit. So now I'm just stitching these hooks and eyes on so that I can do up the back like a corset. And I'm using some gold paint just as a base, and so I can see where I need to put glitter and embellishments. Not an entirely necessary step, but it did help for planning out where I was going to put things. Now, this is like no spoilers, absolutely no spoilers in this video, but I did find it very fascinating to find out that it took 100 seamstresses 300 hours to make Sugarplum's dress for the movie, because of how complicated it was and all these little bits that needed to be sewn by hand. They employed so many sewing students to do some of it, and you can tell when you see her in the movie and you look at her dress, it is just amazing. And I can definitely appreciate that, having done it on a miniature scale. It was hard enough and time consuming enough even at this tiny doll scale. I can only imagine how it was for a human. Now I'm adding on some Elmer's glue to where I just painted, and adding on some glitter. And now I'm just gluing on some individual diamantes and rhinestones. Her dress has some gorgeous embellishments and beading it's just amazing, and this was the only thing I could think of to do on the smaller scale to get that kind of look, because anything bigger I think would have just looked a bit clunky and probably would have affected how the corset would fit her by the time I was finished. It would be all stiff and it wouldn't want to fit around the chest properly, so I thought this is the best way to get that same sort of look. And she's also got these sort of ruffles on her corset, so I made those off camera and I'm just stitching them on individually. So I make them by just ruffling some ribbon up like this and then stitching it on. So this is the finished corset. Sorry I didn't get the rest of it on camera. But I'm happy with how it came out. It's not exactly the same, but I think it's got the same general feel. I went over the sides with this gold ribbon and added some ruffles to the base of the corset to help with the transition with the dress, and I ended up adding a snap because I thought it would be easier to do up her corset if it's already had a fastening. So now onto the skirt. I've already made an underskirt. Well, I need to fix it because it's kind of bare at the back. And this overskirt is working as a base for all of these frills and folderols, which I will have to make by hand. So these petals aren't the right colour, so I'll have to paint them. I'm just doing that with normal purple acrylic paint. Okay, so they're all dry now after a few days. I'm just going to go over them with some high gloss varnish mixed with some pink Pearlex powder. And I thought this would just give it that nice shimmer that it's got in the movie. I was originally going to use these petals for the entire dress, but found that this ribbon worked a lot better, so I think these will be perfect for like the base layer. Okay, so now I've made a bunch of these little ruffles individually. I still don't have enough, so I'm kind of making them as I go and then just pinning and sewing them on one by one until I end up with this. I think it's probably the most complicated skirt I've ever made. Maybe not complicated, but time consuming, and each of those ruffles needed to be made individually, kind of like how you fold up paper fans, but with fabric that needed to be stitched in place. And it's not so pretty underneath, but you can see where I've stitched them all on individually in rows. Yeah, it was a mission, but it's done and I think it looks great, especially with her corset. It's longer in the movie, but I wanted to give it a tutu length because she's going to be a ballerina. And so now we need to make her some pointe shoes, which is interesting because Monster High toes are not on point. They're like the opposite of on point, and I've seen some people cut off the toes and sculpt the ballet shoes with milliput, but I really wasn't feeling up to that after finding out some health things, so I want to kind of get that point look using the shoe itself, so I'm trying to make these using paper mache, so we'll see how that goes. I've never made Monster High shoes from scratch before. I usually just use Monster High shoes and paint them. So this was interesting and nerve-wracking at the same time using paper mache. Paper was too thick, so I'm actually using just normal tissues. I'm just trying to build the layer around the foot while also... I watched a few videos on how pointe shoes are actually made, and they do actually use a type of industrial PVA for the toe box. It's like a hard box that's worked into the toe, and that's how they can actually stand on their toes on point, and they've got that support from the shoe. So I wanted to try do that to make it look like they were standing and dancing on point without having to do any sculpting. So it took a little bit of maneuvering, but I think it's working out okay. It's definitely not as perfect as it would be if I'd just cut off her toes, but I'm happy with it so far. They're going to take forever to dry, but that's okay. I'm not too worried about it looking a bit clumpy or bulky because I'm going to cover them in fabric. So I've sketched out where the shoe's going to be now that this is all hard and dry. So we'll cut off, this is the same fabric I used to make wig caps, and it just helped slip the shoe off the foot so easily. So we'll trim that up, cut around the paper mache until we have a little ballerina shoe. I think they came out really cute. And they fit, yay! I originally tried making some out of polymer clay that were absolutely hideous, and they didn't actually fit on her feet anymore once I baked them. But these, yeah, I can work with these. I'm happy with this. They just need a dab of paint, although I think I went a wee bit too pink. I should have gone more purple. And this is just with normal acrylic paint. I don't bother going over it with varnish because, again, I think I'll cover it with fabric to get it closer to the corset colour. So I'll use the same fabric that I used for her dress and her corset and just cut a sort of horseshoe shape. And I'm just I originally tried to use super glue, but the super glue I had was useless. So I'm struggling a bit here to get it to stay where it's supposed to be staying, so I'm actually going to switch to hot glue. But now it's just sort of trimming around this circular bit and just gluing it to the sole of the foot bit by bit. And just nipping and tucking so that it has the folds and pleats where they would normally be on a ballet slipper. And I don't mind that it's not all in one piece. Most ballet shoes have a seam along the side or the back, so I don't mind that there's a join. It's just getting it to stick where it's supposed to stick. But that looks a lot better, don't you think? You can probably tell that I am mostly winging this. I don't have a set pattern or anything. I'm just gluing and sticking and cutting and tucking until it looks the way it's supposed to. And there we go. I think they look really cute, except that bit of glue there is somewhat unsightly, so I'm going to make a kind of faux sole using the same fabric, just because I think it would look a bit odd out of cardboard and it wouldn't sit flat. I kind of tried that with some paper and ended up having to rip it off, but I think this should work. Get those edges flat. And there we go. Much tidier. And I'm just going to use some of this pink ribbon for the laces. And there we have them, finished ballet slippers. I think they're going to look really cute. Let's try them on for size. Please excuse how horrible I am at tying these ribbons. But they look cute. I'm so happy. They're not too bad for my first pair of Monster High shoes ever. Now for her face up. So Sugarplum has quite modest makeup, not what I'm used to, but it'll be fun. So start off just sketching in her eyes. I always do that with a peach colour pencil because it's lighter and I almost always make mistakes. This is actually from last year when I started her face. So I'm just sketching in her eye colour with watercolour pencils, which I actually wouldn't normally do, so I'm not sure why I did this back then. I think I was a bit nervous doing such a different makeup look from what I was used to. So I've done a lot in a year actually. I'm quite pleased with how my style's changed and developed since then. I'm just going in with some pastels for her eyebrows. Her eyebrows are interesting because in the movie they're very stylized and they are basically just straight lines, kind of like candy cane, which, to be honest, I'm not really a fan of. I think they look quite odd. But so I tried to do something similar but a little bit more natural in my doll, because they look a little they're definitely stylized. So now I'm going in with pastels for her eyeshadow and a little bit of blush. Her makeup isn't hardcore over the top like what I would normally do, so that's a little bit of a challenge, but at the same time it's also not plain makeup like say Kagra or Rin, so this was fun. I'm going in with pastels for her lips, although later after a year I kind of think it's better to go in with just straight watercolor pencil and draw them out, which I don't normally do because it's a very harsh lipstick line and I really like this sort of fluffed out lipstick, but I think it suits her better for the movie and it's closer to what her makeup was in the movie. So if I were to do it again, I wouldn't bother blushing the lips. And just using some white pan pastel on the inner corner of her eyes. And filling in the whites of her eyes with some watercolor pencil. And some pastel to make that brown of her eye transition a bit tidier. And now this is in 2022, where I've finally gone back to finish her face. And I kind of want to try and streamline my process because I usually build up a lot of pastels and do a lot of layers, and I'm wondering if I could actually do it all faster by just going straight in with wet watercolors, or I don't know. So I wanted to try that a little bit this time. So I'm just colour correcting some of what I had done last year. Her blushing was a little bit off, so I'm just going in with some white pan pastel and evening that out a bit. And just making that inner corner of her eye whiter and brighter to give her that nice open dewy eye look. And then now just fixing that blush and pastel. And she is Sugarplum, and Sugarplum is from the land of sweets, so she has to have some sparkle. So I'm putting some white Perlex powder all over her face and in the inner corner of her eye, and some purple Perlex powder along her eyeshadow just to make it all sparkly. And now we're adding in some of those harsh candy cane eyebrow lines. And just bringing out more of that colour and making everything a bit more vibrant. Quite often when I just do a face up in watercolour pencil hair, I often think, well, they look good, I should just leave it here. And then only after I go in with wet watercolours, I'm like, no, yeah, it needed more. So I'm going over her eyes with black and adding in a pupil. And then adding in her eyeliner. I didn't want to go too hardcore with it because she has quite long eyelashes on the outer corner, so I kind of wanted the focus to be mostly on that. I'm trying to get better with how I do the eye wrinkles and folds of the eyelids. I think I'm getting a bit better. It's always something I'm a bit anxious about. I'm not very good at it, so I'm trying. One of the hardest looks I think to pull off is when people have very subtle smoky eye eyeliner or eyeshadow along the bottom of their eye, or just in that bottom outer corner. So I just went in with black pastel to try and fuzz that out a bit, like how it is when people really do their eyeliner with eyeshadow or like a gel liner. Because the line with a wet watercolour pencil or even just a Faber-Castell seems quite harsh. So I'm using a teeny tiny brush with some black pastel on it to create these shadows and that sort of fluffy eyeliner. And going in with lip liner to make her lips more pronounced. And I've seen people like go darker in the outer corners and then sort of blend it as you go into the middle of the lip. So I wanted to give that a try this time because I've never done that before. I'm also using my new camera mount, so I hope this is a lot better and it's not zooming in on my hand and you can actually see what I'm doing more this time. So if you see the camera move ever so slightly, it's just me trying to get a better angle. And this is how she looks after another spray with Mr. Super Clear. I'm just trying to make the transition between the pencil on her lips a bit tidier and then just going in again with that darker purple on the outer corners and just tidying my lines up a little bit. I think I missed a little bit, but easily fixed. And then adding in a few wee highlights with a lighter pink pencil. And now for wet watercolours. I try and add in a lot of eye detail with just a bunch of really teeny tiny little lines. And now I'm just adding some black pastel over the top of her eye to create a shadow. I think it just looks so much more realistic. I also like to add a little bit of red pastels, especially on this inner corner of the eye, because it also just gives it a bit more dimension and looks more realistic. Adding some highlights to her eyes. And just tidying up my lines. There were some things I wasn't quite happy with, so I just spent a little bit of time fixing those and nipping and tucking where it wasn't quite right. And I wanted to try give her eye shine in the middle of her pupil because I thought that could look really cute. And adding some more white Pearlix powder as highlights to her lips and eyes. And some purple Pearlix powder again. By now you can't really see it, so I definitely needed to add some more. And a little bit of pink Pearlix powder as sort of highlighter for her cheeks. And going in with wet watercolour pencil along her eyebrows. Going in with white and then a darker purple. And just bringing out those shadows and lines of her eye folds because they kind of got lost a little bit. And some more black pastel just to add more to that smoky eye. And then I go over her eyeliner with a black wet watercolour pencil. It just really darkens everything up and adds that bit more depth. I could just not do it and it would give a softer look, but I quite like the way it looks. And giving her some dreaded eyelashes. I really need to work on my eyelash game, I think. I use the 3D ones, so I haven't had a lot of practice with the top eyelashes, so they're my weak spot. But the ones on this eye came out pretty good, I think. Just softening that line again by going over it with a normal watercolour pencil. And adding some catch lights to her waterline. And then just some thin white highlights along her eye and the bottom of her eye. Just to add that bit more detail. And some highlights on her eyelid. Topped off with some more white Pearlix powder. So I wet the brush before putting it in the Pearlix powder to make it more saturated, so it's less likely to disappear when I spray it with Mr. Super Clear. And I also put a little bit of this on her lips as well. So one final spray and she'll be about done. Just that final bit of Pearlix for some final highlights. And she's done. So Sugarplum in the movie, this is where her makeup would stop, but I want to add that bit of realism, and I did the eyelashes the same way I did for Rin, and these were actually made using some glue to make a new line where and shorten the eyelashes, because Sugarplum, her eyelashes are most noticeable only on the outer corners, so this time I only put them on the outer corners, just using my usual method of Elmer's glue and then just putting a little bit on the outer edges and scraping off the excess and waiting for that to dry. They always end up pretty solid using this method. And once that was dry, I wanted to add my own style to this Sugarplum, so I actually added some Elmer's glue to her face and added some glitter and sparkles, because if you've seen the movie Black Swan, or seen many types of ballet, a lot of the ballerinas have like glitter and makeup put around their eyes as kind of like a mask or as part of their costume, and I think it's so pretty, so I wanted to do that on this Sugarplum since she's being styled after a ballerina. So this was a bit inspired by the Black Swan makeup in the movie with Natalie Portman, how they do the wings and the sides, they decorate the outer corners of her eyes like the swan wings, but I thought this would look really cute just with glitter. And that's how it looks all done. Usually I gloss the eyes, but this time I want to just gloss her lips and see how that goes, because I've put a lot of detail into her eyes and I don't really want to fuzz it out or obscure it with the varnish, so I think I'll just leave them clean this time. So now we need to put her head back on her body. I should have done it before her eyelashes, but Creepy Kitty was not using her brain. So we'll put her head back on now. I didn't blush her body because I want her to be very poseable like a dancer, so I didn't want any of that to scratch off, and you'll see that the bottom of her legs are a slightly different colour, but that actually isn't noticeable when she's got her stockings on. And she's done! I'm so happy with how she turned out. I think she came out so nicely. It was well worth waiting to finish her this year instead of trying to rush for next year. I'm so happy with how the pointe shoes came out. If you haven't seen the Nutcracker and the Four Realms, I definitely recommend giving it a watch to get into the Christmas spirit. It's a great movie, just really light, fluffy, and so very Christmassy. Thank you again for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more, and of course have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Bye! See you next year!